Good afternoon, KCAA listeners, and good afternoon and good evening to those listening to us on the live stream link. This is the Kathleen Wells Show. I'm Kathleen, your host, and today I'm delighted to have as my guest Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who is a psychiatrist who utilizes a unified field theory of psychiatry, utilizing a broader framework encompassing biology, psychology, and physics to understand racial conflict. And you guys who listen to my show know that racism, white supremacy, is an area that I focus on, aside from other areas. I'm very concerned and very interested in this area. In fact, with the George Zimmerman trial, I think that trial, which the world has been riveted to watching, that trial for me is an exercise in white supremacy. That's what I think. So before I bring on my guest, I'd like to congratulate the Egyptian people because I think this is actually amazing that the people took to the streets, millions upon millions, took to the street to overthrow President Morsi. Despite him being elected, despite him being democratically elected, some have characterized his presidency as a dictatorial theocracy. So I just want to congratulate the Egyptian people for that. Also, I want to bring up the George Zimmerman trial when I bring my guest on, Dr. Cress Welsing, because this is an important trial. So Dr. Welsing practices in Washington, D.C., and is noted for her Cress theory of color confrontation, which explores the practice of white supremacy. Dr. Welsing is the author of the ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors. She's a lecturer and has appeared on numerous television and radio shows. So, Dr. Welsing, thank you for joining me today on the Kathleen Wells Show.
Oh, I'm very glad to be with you.
Well, the first question, I'm absolutely delighted. I'm familiar with some of your work, not all of your work. And actually, I want to say thank you to V if she's listening, because she is the one person that sort of, tugged my tail and said, not tail, that's not the apt word, but she tugged my coattails and said, you've got to get her on your show. You've got to get Dr. Welsing on your show because she talks about racism and white supremacy very powerfully, very effectively. So my first question to you is, let's define it. How do we define racism?
Well, let me share my definition of racism with you that is more than 20 years old. I say racism, white supremacy, is the local and global power system and dynamic structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously, which consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response, as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, for the ultimate purpose of white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on planet Earth, a planet upon which the vast and overwhelming majority of people are classified as non-white, meaning black, brown, red, and yellow, by white-skinned people. And all of the non-white people are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to the genetic recessive white-skinned people.
Okay, so that's a big definition. So my next question is, how did you come to this definition?
Well, I'm a general psychiatrist and child psychiatrist, and when I started training in psychiatry, I was wondering what was making black people mentally ill. And so being a resident in a 3-year resident program, in talking to black patients, of course we had white and black patients, but in talking to black patients, something about racism was always at the center of their history when you take the history as a physician. And so I said, well, I need to understand more about racism. This was not an aspect of the training program which was based around Freudian psychoanalytic theory. And that really did not affect black people. As a matter of fact, the training program, people were being told that black people didn't have the intelligence to benefit from psychotherapy, and that the best treatment for black people was medication. Well, I'm a third-generation physician, father physician, and his father was a physician, and certainly that didn't make any sense to me. And so on my own, I was in pursuit of having a deeper understanding of racism. I thought when I was an undergrad that Karl Marx had answers about racism and that it was based on economics and class struggle, etc. But when you become a physician and you are charged with helping people get well, you have to go beyond someone's theory that doesn't really apply to what it is that you're dealing with. So I was in pursuit of what is racism beyond what Karl Marx and some other people have had to say. And I encountered a black gentleman who had been writing about racism for a number of years, and he was the first person to say racism is a total system construct. Now, that's the critical statement, and he is the person who was first to say that the system functioned in the areas of activity that I mentioned in my definition: economics, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And he said for maintaining a specific power equation of white power over non-white powerlessness. And so then, bringing to bear in the situation my background in biology, background in medicine, I was raising the question in my own mind, well, if such a system does exist, and indeed this has been the experience of black people for 500 years, that we have always been in a situation where there was white power domination. And so then I started raising the question, well, why would it happen? And then thinking about the demographics, even though black people are called minorities, or people of color are called minorities in this area of the world, the global reality is that whites are a very tiny minority on the planet, fewer than 1/10 of the people. The overwhelming majority of people on planet Earth are black, brown, red, and yellow. And just as I was mentioning, the theme for many, many years, up to the present, on the part of many people who classify themselves as white, was that black people are genetically inferior to white people. Well, being a physician and knowing genetics and understanding that white skin is a genetic recessive trait, the ability to produce the black pigment melanin in skin is a genetically dominant trait. If anybody's confused by that, just think about President Barack Obama. His mother is white. His father was a black man. And anytime you take a recessive trait plus a dominant trait, the dominant trait is going to prevail. And so that helped me understand that this thing that we call racism, white supremacy, and racism is white supremacy. White supremacy is racism. It's not racism and white supremacy. Racism is white supremacy. That this dynamic evolved, as I said in my definition, for the purpose of white genetic survival on the planet. In other words, if the people who classify themselves as whites, maybe starting in the 15th century when they came out of Europe, starting with Columbus, the voyages of discovery, I say what they actually discovered was that everybody else on the planet was a colored person, a person with skin pigmentation, and if the men had sexual relations and waited 9 months, they would see that the children always looked like the mothers. So white people began to understand they could disappear unless they structured domination of all the people of color on planet Earth. And that's the basis of my work or my thinking, which has evolved, the essays that are in the book, The ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors. Everything derived from that understanding. And again, as a psychiatrist, I maintain that black people cannot have mental health. People of color cannot have mental health unless they understand the power dynamic, the power context, the power construct that surrounds and controls their lives. Even people who classify themselves as white, they could benefit greatly by understanding, instead of saying white is superior, beginning to confront the reality that the white population on the planet is a tiny minority, just like it's beginning to be a minority in this area of the world. And also to confront their fears of genetic annihilation, which is why there cannot be gun control. The gun became the answer for the white collective, consciously and or subconsciously, that if the black male, and black people have the greatest genetic potential to cause white genetic annihilation because we have, the greatest genetic power in terms of color production is people who have very black skin. And that's why the color code that all people of color learn, I don't care whether you're in Asia, in India, or in Africa, you learn if you're black, get back, brown, stick around, yellow, mellow, white, right. Now, that's the color code that all people of color would learn who have had experiences under white domination, because the people who had the greatest genetic potential to cause white genetic annihilation had to be pushed to the back and are being pushed to the back this very moment as we speak. This has been continuous. So I maintain that white people could begin to, people classify themselves as white. They could begin to understand why they have to have so many guns, and even what they call the Obama effect. Once a black man became president and a black family was in the White House, then white people began to massively purchase guns. And I say that the gun evolved as the defense to the fear of white genetic annihilation. And when we hear, we have epidemic levels of so-called police officers shooting black males, which could tie into the Trayvon Martin case, but we could talk about that later, where a white police officer, after shooting a black male, would call it justifiable homicide or say, I thought he had a weapon. Now, the black man or someone like, just say black male person, that after the person had been shot and killed, and then they discover, he didn't have a gun. He didn't have a weapon. What he had in his hands was his wallet or his keys. But the sentence, I thought he had a weapon, really pertains to his genitalia and to the testicles that contain the genetic material that could cause white genetic annihilation. So at a subconscious symbolic level, it is perceived as the weapon that the black man has that can cause white genetic annihilation, which is why there was a major period in our history in this part of the world where black men would be lynched and castrated, and the accusation would be that he looked at a white woman, he thought he wanted to look at a white woman, or a white woman said he looked at her, et cetera, et cetera. The black man would be attacked. There's no history of black men attacking white men's genitals. There's just no history of that.
So all of this is happening on the unconscious or subconscious level. It's not something that people are even aware of.
Well, there is conscious and or subconscious intent. Do you see? But once, in other words, the people who classify themselves as white refer to themselves as a majority. They refer to themselves as being genetically superior to people of color. Now, all of that is not factual, but they suppress the truth. And so when the truth is suppressed, it's sort of suppressing it into the subconscious. And so there is an awareness. In other words, if a black person goes to make a loan at the bank, if there's a white bank officer, they know instinctively that they're not going to give the same loan or low interest rate to the black person that they give to the white person. Mm-hmm. So people are aware. When decisions are made in an office, for example, or in a company, who's going to get the promotion? A white person is making a decision. Who's going to get the promotion, a white person or a black person? Or who's going to get the highest salary for the same work, a white or a black person? So people are making these conscious decisions continuously. When a black man is stopped, driving while black, the officer knows that he is stopping a black person. Mm-hmm.
So they're making these decisions consciously, but when you confront them about
why is the critical question.
Right.
Do you see? In other words, there's absolutely no discussion. I am the only psychiatrist in the United States of America who has been talking about racism, white supremacy for 40 years. I'm the only psychiatrist in the world.
And why is that?
You say, why is that?
Yeah, why are you the only one?
Well, because the discussion of racism is something that is suppressed. Do you see, for example, the present Attorney General, Eric Holder? Do you remember when he said, are we a nation of cowards? Mm-hmm. Being unable to talk about racism. See, people can talk about homosexuality, same-sex marriage. They can talk about everything other than racism, white supremacy, because that is a discussion of the behavior and the motivations of the people who are dominant in power. Mm-hmm. And so
I try to talk about it on Twitter, and they deleted my account.
I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, but I didn't hear what you were saying. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I tried to talk about racism, white supremacy on Twitter, and they suspended my account. So, yes, I think all of us always see this denial, this constant denial, this inability to even discuss it rationally.
Exactly. Yeah. You see, the Supreme Court's decision, the recent decision about voting, was as though we don't need that anymore because racism somehow doesn't exist, or we're post-racial, because we have one black man in the White House. Mm-hmm. Now, even though there's significant discussion on the part of conservative people who classify themselves as white, that we want to see him fail, or we're going to work to see him fail, or we're going to work to see that he has one term, or we're not going to listen to anything that he has to say, or we're going to block him at whatever it is that he recommends, even if it's for the betterment or the good of all people, regardless as to color. Mm-hmm. Do you see? But so the why that exists is the critical question. And I believe that I have answered it. And I used to advertise in the paper. Does anybody have a better definition of racism, white supremacy? Because
you would advertise that in the paper?
Yes. You see, in other words, let's say as a scientist, do you have a better explanation that can even explain ball games? Nobody has.
Right. And and I've always said, if you can ask, why does sexism exist? We can ask that question. Why is there sexism?
See, I say that sexism exists amongst white people because the white female says what? Her ideal mate is tall, dark, and handsome. Mm-hmm. Not tall, blonde. Mm-hmm. Tall, dark, and handsome. And just like what we see happening, many white females are reaching out to have sexual relationships with black men. Mm-hmm. See, because of the desire to produce color. I mean, Nobel Prize laureate William Shockley, I debated him a number of years ago. And because I had written in the Cress theory about white women wanting to have black babies. And so he asked me, we were on television, and he asked me, well, Dr. Welsing, what percentage of white women would you say want to have black babies? I said the same number that's suntan.
The same number that what?
The same number that's suntan.
Oh, that's like all of them.
Well, you see, what are we seeing? You know, in other words, it's the new thing to adopt a black baby.
Right.
Or to have a black man.
Right. Well, you know what? We're going to take a break. When we come back from the break, I'm going to open up the lines. Are you open to taking phone calls?
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Okay, we're going to take a break. I'll open up the phone line when we come back from the break. The toll-free number is 1-888-909-1050. So if you have any questions or comments for Dr. Welsing, please feel free to call in. Also, on the other side of the break, I'm going to ask you, what is your response to those who contend that your theory is pseudo-scientific and are a theory of black supremacy? I'm going to ask you when we come back from the break.
Like
so we'll be right back. Okay, we'll be right back.
When the day is done, hope so much your race will be all wrong. Then you find to jump the gun, have to go back where you begun. When the day is done, when the night is come, some get...
Can you smell the aroma of sweet, delicious fruit and flaky, melt-in-your-mouth crust? What is that? It's Cobblermania. Cobblermania is a specialty dessert company founded several years ago that sells delicious fruit cobblers that are baked daily and sweetened with diabetic-friendly agave. Agave, you ask? Yes, it's like sugar, but not sugar, and better than sugar. Cobblermania cobblers are sold at the Torrance, Hollywood, Culver City, San Dimas, Marina Del Rey Farmers Market. Also, apple and peach are sold daily at the Golden Bird in Los Angeles. You know Golden Bird that sells the fried chicken? At 83rd and Western, daily apple and peach cobblers. And yes, guess what? They're coming to the Pomona Fairplex Truck Fest. In fact, they're there right now, Thursdays from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Gate 1. Some of the favorites: peach, apple, mango, blueberry peach, blackberry, apple, white peach. If you go to the Pomona Truck Fest Gate 1 on Thursdays from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. and mention me, Kathleen, you'll get something special. You don't want to miss it. I've had them. They're delicious.
Conscience International is an organization specializing in the delivery of medical aid to refugee victims of war and natural disasters. Since 1982, Conscience International has assisted refugees in the Middle East, Africa, the Caribbean, and Asia. The organization is led by Dr. James Jennings, whose life-saving efforts have been acknowledged by humanitarian awards from around the world. For more information and to make a tax-deductible donation to this worthy cause, please visit the Conscience International website at conscienceinternational.org.
Logos is an online quarterly journal of modern culture, politics, and society featuring cutting-edge articles on politics, culture, the arts, as well as book reviews and original, often experimental fiction and poetry. Logos fosters critical dialogue on modern society and current affairs by giving readers insight into the events that shape their lives. Logos, critical ideas for the engaged reader. Read online for free at www.logosjournal.com. For information about submissions to the journal, please contact Logos Online at igc.org.
Playgrounds for Palestine is a non-for-profit 501c3 organization dedicated to upholding the Palestinians' child's rights to play. This is a right enshrined in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. We operate through a volunteer board and staff, the generosity of our supporters, and a lot of heart. To date, Playgrounds for Palestine has constructed 15 playgrounds in Palestine, as well as refugee camps in Lebanon and Syria. To contribute to this most worldly cause, please go to our website at www.playgroundsforpalestine.org or send a check to Playgrounds for Palestine, P.O. Box 559, Yardley, Pennsylvania 19067 at www.playgroundsforpalestine.org.
KCAA.
Welcome back. This is the Kathleen Welsh Show, and my guest today is Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who is a psychiatrist who practices in Washington, D.C., and she has the Cress theory of color confrontation. Her paper, she's the author of the ISIS papers, the keys to the colors. So she utilizes a broad framework encompassing biology, psychology, and physics to understand racial conflict and white supremacy. So, Dr. Welsing, what I wanted to ask you is, what is your response to those who critique your theory as pseudoscientific or say that it is a theory of black supremacy?
Well, I would really just, first of all, ask the person, does racism, white supremacy exist? Secondly, what is their explanation of racism, white supremacy? You see, to find out whether the person is just name-calling or whether the person is someone that is in pursuit. You see, I am a physician. I am a person who is practicing in the mental health field, attempting to help people solve the problems that they face in life. Mm-hmm. And so for someone to say, well, something is pseudoscientific, I would, what is their definition of pseudoscientific? What is their definition of science? And again, the most important thing, racism is the major problem that exists not only in this area of the world, but all over the world. Racism, white supremacy is a huge problem. It's a problem that causes stress to the vast majority of people on the planet.
It's a global phenomenon.
It's a global phenomenon.
Exactly.
And so if someone is going to engage in name-calling, that would be, racism is dealing with a behavioral phenomenon that is as deadly as cancer.
Uh-huh.
And you have laboratories all over the world where people are working on trying to solve the problem of various kinds of cancer, coming up with different, do you see what I'm saying? And so the different researchers, not that they're competing, but they're working on various aspects of the problem to solve a problem that is killing human beings. Well, racism and white supremacy is probably killing more human beings on the planet than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem of gun control, is a great big problem. But if you don't understand why people feel they have to have so many guns, I heard a statement today on a radio program that there are more guns than there are people.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the panic and the fear of white genetic annihilation. And I encourage people to buy the ISIS papers where they can see that if you're looking at a lateral view of male genitalia and turn it around 90 degrees, you see a gun. And the gun is called the Great Equalizer. You see, we are trying to answer the problems, and the point of talking about racism is not to hate white people. It's to transform, change the system of injustice, of racism, white supremacy, to a system of justice so that there can be peace. But the people who are dominating the planet and who have most power are the people who are fearful of their genetic annihilation.
Mm-hmm.
And in psychiatry, before psychiatry just became pharmaceutical psychiatry, when psychiatry remains for people who can afford to pay for it, where someone is talking to them over an extended period of time, helping them to gain insight into their thinking and their behavior so that they, when necessary, can transform their behavior to something that is more constructive and functional. And so,
something more positive.
Excuse me?
Something more positive. And we can, there's no better example today, because we've seen many examples of this white supremacy playing itself out, but there's no better example today than the Zimmerman trial. Would you agree with that?
Well, see, I say that the Zimmerman trial, I'm sure, out in California as well as here on the East Coast, you have all kind of radio programs, people calling in and discussing various aspects of the Zimmerman trial. I say that the Zimmerman trial is a test of the system of racism, white supremacy, because George Zimmerman classified himself as white, even though they keep using the term Hispanic in the media. He classified himself as white. And this trial is no different. Do you see? The stand your ground and I have a right to kill a black man is the theme throughout the history of this country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is the theme for white genetic survival. Well, then I have to be able to kill the threat, consciously and or subconsciously. Do you see? But I have a gun pointed at the person that is the genetic threat. And then I say he attacked me, or he had a weapon.
Right.
Do you see? But it's justifiable harm. I have the right to kill him.
Right.
Therefore, you cannot put my guns under restriction. Certainly a black man cannot put my guns under a restriction. I have to be able to use my guns. Well, I would prefer that, there be discussions. I commend you for having a program where racism can be discussed, and I'm sure you have other people come on your program and discuss racism from their point of view, but I would dare wager that there's no one that has explained ball games as I have explained them. Why there are ball games, the significance of ball games in the system of racism, white supremacy.
Yeah, I know that you use symbol. You believe in symbolism.
It's not I believe in symbolism. The brain forms symbols. Cress Welsing didn't invent going back in time thousands of years ago and coming up through, behavioral scientists. People have used symbols. A symbol is just a contraction of a concept. And so, for example, I'm a child psychiatrist as well as a general psychiatrist. In child psychiatry, we are trained to look at, young children can't sit down and tell you what their problem is in the same way an adult person can. And so what you do with children is you take them in the playroom and you watch the toys that they select to play with. And you are trained to interpret that activity and gain insight into the kinds of things that the child is concerned about. We would say play is the work of children. And so when you put them in a situation where there are a number of toys and the things that they go to and what they choose to do with those toys gives you information about what the child is concerned about. And so you're making an interpretation about the symbolic play that the child is engaged in as to, some of the issues that they might be dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And so the creation of symbols, there are whole dictionaries of symbols. But a symbol, so when a person looks at a symbol, the brain translates that because of what the symbol means within a given cultural dynamic.
Wow, this is some heavy stuff. So why don't we take a call now from Z in Illinois. Hi, Z. Hello?
Hello.
I think we have a bad connection. Can you hear me?
I heard her say hello, but it's very faint.
Yeah, and it's very faint. I don't think I can hear her. Can you hear her?
I can barely
hear you.
I can't hear.
I'm not
Well,
sure.
you know what? Why don't we take a break? Because I can barely hear. I don't know what the audio difficulties we're having. Why don't we take a break, and when we come back, we'll see if we can fix them. So we're going to go to break now, and we'll try to fix the audio difficulties. We'll be right back.
When the day is done, down to earth and sinks the sun, along with everything that was lost and won. When the day is done, when the day is done, hope so.
Conscience International is an organization specializing in the delivery of medical aid to refugee victims of war and natural disasters. Since 1982, Conscience International has assisted refugees in the Middle East, Africa, the Caribbean, and Asia. The organization is led by Dr. James Jennings, whose life-saving efforts have been acknowledged by humanitarian awards from around the world. For more information and to make a tax-deductible donation to this worthy cause, please visit the Conscience International website at conscienceinternational.org.
Logos is an online quarterly journal of modern culture, politics, and society featuring cutting-edge articles on politics, culture, the arts, as well as book reviews and original, often experimental fiction and poetry. Logos fosters critical dialogue on modern society and current affairs by giving readers insight into the events that shape their lives. Logos, critical ideas for the engaged reader. Read online for free at www.logosjournal.com. For information about submissions to the journal, please contact Logos Online at igc.org.
Can you smell the aroma of sweet, delicious fruit and flaky, melt-in-your-mouth crust? What is that? It's Cobblermania. Cobblermania is a specialty dessert company founded several years ago that sells delicious fruit cobblers that are baked daily and sweetened with diabetic-friendly agave. Agave, you ask? Yes. It's like sugar, but not sugar, and better than sugar. Cobblermania cobblers are sold at the Torrance, Hollywood, Culver City, San Dimas, Marina Del Rey Farmers Market. Also, apple and peach are sold daily at the Golden Bird in Los Angeles. You know Golden Bird that sells the fried chicken? At 83rd and Western, daily apple and peach cobblers. And yes, guess what? They're coming to the Pomona Fairplex Truck Fest. In fact, they're there right now, Thursdays from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Gate 1. Some of the favorites: peach, apple, mango, blueberry peach, blackberry, blackberry, apple, white peach. If you go to the Pomona Truck Fest, Gate 1, on Thursdays from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. and mention me, Kathleen, you'll get something special. You don't want to miss it. I've had them. They're delicious.
Playgrounds for Palestine is a non-for-profit 501c3 organization dedicated to upholding the Palestinians' child's rights to play. This is a right enshrined in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. We operate through a volunteer board and staff, the generosity of our supporters, and a lot of heart. To date, Playgrounds for Palestine has constructed 15 playgrounds in Palestine, as well as refugee camps in Lebanon and Syria. To contribute to this most worldly cause, please go to our website at www.playgroundsforpalestine.org or send a check to Playgrounds for Palestine, P.O. Box 559, Yardley, Pennsylvania 19067 at www.playgroundsforpalestine.org.
KCAA.
Okay, welcome back. This is the Kathleen Welsh Show, and my guest is Dr. Cress Welsing, who is a psychiatrist who utilizes a unified field theory of psychiatry encompassing biology, psychology, and physics to understand racial conflict. Her book is, or she's the author of the ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors. And this is heavy. This is a heavy topic. This is heavy information. We need to address and figure out, why do we have racism in our society? Why do we have it globally? So, let's see if we can get our question in. We have a question from Z in Illinois. Hi, Z.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful. Good evening, Dr. Welsing and Kathleen.
No, I can't hear, so you have to repeat.
Well, now she can't hear. We're having. Well, you know what? Why don't you tell me the question, and I'll repeat it.
Absolutely. I have a two-part question for you. Based on this idea that so much progress has been made in race relations, the recent Supreme Court ruling to strike down that section of the Voting Rights Act, in light thereof, first part, do you share my feelings that blacks in America and perhaps everywhere else in the world are chasing an illusion that blacks and whites can ever live together in a just system? And the second part of that is...
Oh, no, let's just go with this one first. Let me just go with this one first because I'm going to repeat it. So, Dr. Welsing, the question from Z in Illinois is, given the Supreme Court ruling, the recent Supreme Court ruling regarding the Voting Rights Act, do you really believe that blacks and whites can ever get along in a just society? Yeah, that's the question.
Well, you see, I would say that the problem between people who classify themselves as white and the people they classify as non-whites, meaning black, brown, red, and yellow, is the problem of racism, white supremacy. Now, the majority people, white people, are fewer than 1/10 of the people on the planet. 9/10 of the people on this planet are black, brown, red, and yellow. And so that answer as to whether the problem of racism, white supremacy, will ever be solved is in the hands of the non-white global majority. It's in the hands of those people who decide to understand the problem, not waste time hating white people, but begin to understand that any problem that the brain can perceive is a problem that can be solved. Any problem that the brain can perceive is a problem that can be solved if there's diligence in working on the problem. Mm-hmm. And so this has been my effort because where did I start? I started as a physician looking at a dynamic that was making people ill and continues to make people ill. All the hypertension, all the diabetes, all the renal disease and need for dialysis, all of this is tied to the environment that is 24/7 stress on black people in particular and non-white people in general, because racism is 24/7 stress in all areas of people activity. Someone could take the blood pressure of black people watching the George Zimmerman trial.
Exactly.
And they are wondering and questioning whether the death of this black male teenager is going to be handled in a just way by a person who pursued him with a gun, even when the police were telling him to stop.
Right. You know, it's very stressful. Someone on my Facebook page said that or on my Twitter account said, just watching the Zimmerman trial sends my blood pressure up. I feel the same. You know, I'm like stressed. I mean, I think like my hand is in a fist when I'm watching it. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Do you see? Because it's the age-old dynamic of whether a black male person can be perceived at will. I'm in my office. I just got a call from someone who heard me on the radio yesterday, and they were telling me that they worry each and every day about what will happen to their teenage son who's 18 years old. Every time he goes out, the mother has to worry, and that there have been 3 male children in their family, teenagers who have been killed. Mm-hmm. Do you see? So this is a gigantic problem, and I say the people of courage. And if there are people who classify themselves as white who say they're not racist, they don't want to be, well, they will first of all have to talk about this problem. That is the test.
They have to talk about these problems, but I find consistently they deny. Or they say, well, they say, well, I did this, I was better than this. You know, when they want to say they're the exception. They either deny or say they're the exception.
Defined, first of all. Some people say, well, I didn't have slaves. I'm not talking about slavery in the abstract. Slavery was a phase of the racism, white supremacy dynamic. Racism was a phase. It has been continuous. And I say to another test. For example, you have people who classify themselves as white who say, I'm not racist. And then, several questions later you say, how much money would you have to be paid to change places with a black person?
Mm-hmm.
You see, and that gets up into the millions.
Oh, and they get up to the millions?
The person is aware that black people are being treated in a way that they would not want to themselves be treated.
Uh-huh. Okay, so is Z still on the line? Are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm still on the line.
Oh, great. So you have another question.
Yes. Dr. King and Malcolm X, they both had the same goals, but with different approaches. What are your thoughts on Africans building their own nation, independent of Caucasians?
Okay, so she says, Dr. King, this is the question, Dr. Welsing. Dr. King and Malcolm X, I think I'm paraphrasing you correctly, had different. I don't want to put the. What do you feel that blacks should build their own nation? Am I paraphrasing properly, Z?
Yes, in a sense,
you can't build your own nation.
That was pretty much, I think, what the difference between Dr. King.
Oh wait, she's answering. Say that again. Dr. Welsing, go ahead and answer.
Okay. In other words, racism, white supremacy is a global system. It's local, national, global. So at this point in time, people who classify themselves as white control the power dynamic on the planet. And so to say, well, I'm going to go over here in this corner and do my own thing, that's not possible. That's not possible. You have to deal with the system as a whole. And I say, for example, Dr. Martin Luther King performed a very, he was a hero. He was, what shall we say, courageous. And he gave his life. He felt that if people learn to love one another. Now, that's a very ideal thing. But if everybody on the planet Earth with the demographics on planet Earth. So, in other words, you have 1/10 of the people on the planet who are white, 9/10 of the people on the planet who are black, brown, red, and yellow, and the black, brown, red, and yellow 9/10 global majority are genetically dominant. And so if everybody on the planet just decided, look, let's put aside differences and let's just all love each other. And so to an extent, some of that would translate into sexual activity together. White would disappear. Just with love.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty deep concept.
So the white population is aware of it just in the same way when President Lincoln, after he emancipated the slaves, the African people who were enslaved, and in his own writing, he knew that, well, yes, I'm going to emancipate. Slavery is bad, but we can't have black people being in a situation of social equality with white people. Because if everybody just, had the same opportunities, got along together, and especially if you have white females saying my ideal mate is tall, dark, and handsome, thinking that consciously and or subconsciously, then white would disappear.
Mm-hmm.
So
I heard some.
This is why the definition, the most important part of my definition, for the purpose of white genetic survival and preventing white genetic annihilation on this particular planet with these particular demographics and with this particular pattern of genetic reality.
Mm-hmm.
And Frances Welsing did not invent the numbers. Frances Welsing did not invent the genetic reality. But I am able to think and correlate.
Okay, why don't we take another call from Kevin from Boston. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, how you doing? Miss Wells?
Yes.
Yes, how you doing, Miss Wells?
Good.
The question I wanted to ask, first of all, I want to say to Miss Welsing that I appreciate her books and I appreciate her insight. We have all types of races on this planet, you know, different shades of people, brown, black, beige, tan, white. I'm just, what is it particular about the Western European that makes him in such fear of other people, you know, other hues of color? Why, you know, everyone has dealt with other people on this planet for years. What makes him go to an extreme in reaction to his fear of other people? Can you give me an answer to that?
Well, I think you haven't been listening, have you, Kevin? But did you get? Because well,
I did just clock in. I'm getting ready for work. I just clocked in about 15 minutes ago.
Yeah, you missed her whole thesis. So, did you get that, Dr. Welsing?
Actually, I read her book. Oh. You know, so what I'm trying to say. I want to hear it. I just want to. She already said it fine. Okay.
Okay, but I'll repeat it for you. And could you hang up because she can't hear you? I don't know why we're having audio difficulties. This is really bothering me. But essentially, okay, Dr. Welsing, Kevin from Boston. Yeah, could you hang up, Kevin? That's great.
Tell Dr. Welsing I said thank her very much for her existence.
Okay. Kevin from Boston says, thank you very much for your existence. He reads your material. And essentially his question is, why does the white European fear so much? And I think you addressed that, but if you want to go over it again briefly, we have 2 more minutes?
Just briefly, Kevin, look at the president. The president had a black father and a white mother. White is the genetic recessive trait. Black, the ability to produce the black pigment melanin, is the genetically dominant trait. And if everybody on the planet with a tiny global minority of whites and a majority of black, brown, red, and yellow people, all people who can produce melanin pigment, white would disappear. And this is the conscious and or subconscious concern. And every major problem that we talk about, even whether or not it's abortion, whether abortion rights for women, this is white people being nervous about white people getting rid of white babies. And the census report came out just recently talking about already the white deaths are more than the white births.
Mm-hmm, I saw that.
For white survival, you have to prevent the women from having abortions.
Mm-hmm.
Every single thing that we see as a major issue, whether it's abortion, whether it's voting rights, affirmative action, going to school, or whether it's gun control, the violence, you see why black people are killing themselves or killing one another in the urban centers. That's because of the imposed unemployment of black males that is above 30%, 40%, 50% in many communities. Well, that kind of frustration, that's why the people, are demonstrating in Egypt. Some of it is because the people don't have jobs, or they don't have, can't get gasoline for their cars.
You know what? I hear the music, Ms. Dr. Welsing, and I'm going to have you on again because our time is up.
And I'm going to talking, right?
Yeah, I'm going to have you on again when the audio is perfect. I promise you. Because today, and people want to call in and talk to you, so we're going to do this again, and I really appreciate you taking the time. So, this is the Kathleen Wells Show. My guest was Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. Check out her ISIS papers, The Keys to the Colors, the ISIS papers. Thank you, Dr. Welsing.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, we'll do it again. Bye-bye. See you next week.